Hello again. I've been very cozy lately, thanks to a combination of two things. One, the weather outside has been horrific. So, two, I've been remaining indoors, as ever, and spending far too many hours playing Vintage Story. It's not a new game, but it's new to me, and I've been completely blind to its existence until now. So I decided to keep my blindness intact and jump in, making a video of my first 100 days in the game. Assuming I survive winter, that is. And also the horrors beyond comprehension of man, but we'll get to that. If you've played a lot of Vintage Story before, this video gets into some of the later game content in the back half, so stick around for that. But if, like me, you have absolutely no idea what this game is, then all you really need to know is that it looks like Minecraft, but somebody made all of the crafting and survival elements way too detailed. And you can join me through the early game struggle to get a good understanding of how things work. And don't write the game off based on the Minecraft comparison, it's very quickly become one of my favourite games. I think the best way to explain the wonderful depths that this game reaches is to just get right into my playthrough, which starts with character creation. I don't really know exactly what the character is, just something human adjacent, I suppose. Don't smirk at me like that, you nasty green freak. Eventually I make my beautiful, perfect creation, who kind of looks a bit like a Wish.com Sonic the Hedgehog. You can choose a starting class, all of which give positives and negatives, and some of which grant unique crafting options. But you can also just be a normie. A commoner. Nothing good, nothing bad, just a dude. That's what I chose, because I don't really know enough to properly judge the value of the other classes. So here we are, standing on a little grassy hill, the wind whipping through our hair, watching the distant mountains being generated. You're currently seeing the stable version 1.19, by the way. About 30 hours into the playthrough, I swap onto the brand new and shiny 1.20 update, in case you're wondering. Now, I mentioned that this is a blind playthrough, but I do know what the game is about, in a basic sense. So I know that I need to grab some rocks, specifically flint, because here's where you get your first taste of the game's crafting system. If you want a flint axe, then first you need to use another rock to break a piece of flint into the shape of an axe head. We'll quickly do that for various other tools, a spearhead, a knife head, another spearhead for some reason, and lastly a shovel. Now, being a hardcore gamer, I know that the other half of this equation is a stick. So I go to bash some leaves, and just like that, I've got a basic caveman's toolkit ready to go. You might have noticed something when I was crafting though. I have no inventory. I have to make my inventory, the first iteration of which is with baskets made from reeds. Very good. Now we've got some space to work with. I wander around aimlessly for a short while, cutting down a tree, turning said tree into firewood, collecting some grass, and then finding this. A good bit of blue clay mixed into the dirt. I know that I need this, as well as fire clay, which is also conveniently right here, thanks to the game's very useful survival handbook. You see, I'm playing this game blind, but you're never really that blind in Vintage Story, because all the information you would ever need to get going is right there. Okay, you know what? I think I have everything I need here. And that's almost certainly not true, but I don't know any better, so it's decided. I'll live here, which means I need a box made of dirt. I'll at least embed it into a hillside though to make it look somewhat natural. You can make dirt blocks go a little bit further by mixing them with dry grass. This is called cob, and it feels a little bit unnecessary. There's no shortage of dirt here, but whatever, it feels somehow more civilized this way. So here you go. Welcome to my dirt cuboid. It's not much, but it's mine. Now let's take the leap from the completely uncivilized proto-human to full-on caveman by lighting a fire, which involves rubbing wood together for quite some time. Next on the to-do list is learning what to do with all of this clay. A bean-aid is mighty tempting, but I think I'm missing a few of the ingredients, mainly the bees, so I think we'll start with a simple storage vessel. And just like with the stone tools, I have to actually form this vessel from scratch, layer by layer, but not voxel by voxel like I'm currently doing. Don't worry, I notice after an alarmingly high number of layers that I can switch to either a larger brush or set it to duplicate the layer below for repetitive things like this. Now that I've formed it, I need to fire it, which can be done in a pit kiln. Basically, you bury it surrounded by flammable materials, set it on fire, and leave it for a day or so. But it's getting a little bit dark to be doing that right now, so we'll block up the door, put a few logs on the fire, and head into our straw bed, which I made earlier in a break from clay forming. There's definitely an argument to be made against sleeping in an enclosed box with a wood fire burning, but I don't know what kind of horrific things show up in the dark of night, so I'll take my chances with carbon monoxide. The enemy you know, and all that. When I wake up, it's still dark out, so I'm just kind of waiting for the sunrise, smashing back handfuls of cranberries to keep starvation at bay, and when morning eventually threatens the horizon, I'm off out to get wood. Probably would have been smart to settle right next to a massive forest because it turns out you need a lot of this stuff, but that's my burden to bear. You don't have to watch me running around, I just appear at my destination, which is the small birch forest to our west. After some light deforestation and berry foraging, I stumble across this caravan. A trader by the name of Aphid. He's an artisan, meaning he'll buy and sell a selection of crafting bits. Typically he'll sell a load of clay pots and tapestries, and will buy shiny rocks and clay. This inventory restocks, I think daily, but I'm not actually sure. The currency for trading is gears. We don't have any right now, but you find them here and there, we'll get to that. For now, I'll bid Aphid here farewell and head back out for some exploration. I want to get to know my surroundings a bit, and also it would be nice to eat something more substantial than a cranberry. So when I spotted this fox, I decided to strike with my spear. And to my surprise, the fox fought back and killed me quite handily. After reclaiming my stuff from where I was killed, I found a deer, and I had much better luck killing it, even though it did also fight back, sort of, in its own weird way. From it I got some fat, a raw hide, and some red meat. All of these things are very useful in their own special ways. Something that I find relatively often in the sharp hills surrounding my home is that wild animals will quite happily leap to their deaths. I found this hare carcass here, but sadly when they do this you don't get to harvest very much from them, so I only got a small hide for its troubles. Headed back home now, I'm attacked by another deer. I have no idea what I did to deserve this, but I run it into the mud hut where it gets stuck. Man, deer really are crazy. Anyway, let's throw some clay about. We'll need crucibles sometime relatively soon, so I might as well make some since I'm going to be firing this other pot as well. On the topic of crucibles, the reason I need them is for copper, the earliest useful metal you can acquire in Vintage Story. You just find it scattered around the place, you'll see later, but obviously that means we would also need some charcoal. Don't worry, we'll get to that too. But wait, hold please for a moment. What appears to be a lump of clay is trying to kill me and needs stabbing to death. So I guess that probably means it's time for bed. I wake up a little early, 3 AM, with the moans of more nasties outside the window. Thankfully I have a spear and they have arms, so after a few pokes this stupid little guy runs away, directly into my burning pit. Not the brightest clay monster. But anyway, there are so many little different early progression angles all vying for my attention right now, like this here. I can use a lump of fat to cure a hide in a basic fashion, turning it into a pelt, which can then become a slightly better backpack than the reed baskets we have now. But it's not instant, it's going to take a hot minute, so my mind goes back to copper, for which we'll need charcoal like I said, for which we'll need wood, lots of wood. You dig a pit at least 2 by 2 by 2 and fill it with firewood. I don't have enough, do I? Oh, I should have settled down closer to a forest, but never mind. While we're out getting more firewood, I find some quartz in the wall of a cave here. Like I'll be doing a lot in this playthrough, I mark it on my map and move on. Next thing we find are some turnips. Fantastic, now we have seeds. Agriculture is surely the foundation of all human advancement. You can't settle down and build permanent structures if you've constantly got to chase around herds of wild animals just to keep yourself fed. Anyway, those are slightly lofty thoughts for someone that hasn't figured out charcoal yet. Back to woodcutting. When we eventually make it back home, there's this thing here. It's a temporal rift, a floating anus through which the world will curl out vile beings upon me. Not a great thing to have on the front lawn, but there's nothing we can do about that, so we'll just have to coexist. Happier news is that our pots are finished firing. Very good. My inventory is all clogged up with firewood though, so let's just deal with that first, topping off the firewood in the pit before covering and lighting it. Apparently this will burn for less than a day, so we'll check back tomorrow. Right, pot. Sweet merciful pot. How freeing it is to have something to put things in. You'll also see at the top of the screen that this pot applies a negative multiplier to the speed at which food perishes. Negative as in it slows it down. It's a good thing. Like a really crap fridge. A really crap fridge that would be perfect for storing turnips in, so let's plant some of those. I want a wall out front now to prevent the turnips from escaping, and I learned that I can make those out of rocks. Classic wall building tech. Just a good old stack of rocks. You can't beat that. I mean, actually, you obviously can beat that, but it will work for now. Whilst out gathering rocks, I proved that I'm more water than the water deer, swimming up behind it like a Paleolithic Michael Phelps and putting it down before performing some deep water butchery. Anyway, alright, with that the nips are secured. Got little gates made of sticks and everything. But I don't want them messing with my nips while I sleep, so I'd best build a door for my muddy hovel. It's considerably more convenient than having to brick myself in every night and dig back out again in the morning. My evening consists of working on a clay watering can and fending off the night horrors before finally heading to sleep. In the morning, it appears that my gates didn't work. The reason for this should be fairly obvious, but let's dig our way out of here to relative safety and... yeah, you see the problem here? The monsters can just get on the roof and drop down to the front door. Well, I'm not gonna fix that problem. I've got a watering can to fire, and now I need food real bad. It turns out you can cook cattail roots, and they grow in massive batches, so it feels like an easier way to get a big stack of food than running around foraging berries. So after returning home and dropping them on the fire to cook, I'll check on the charcoal, which is indeed done. Very good. Now we're ready to make some copper. Well, aside from that one rather important part of the process, having copper. So we'll be doing some foraging for that. But first, it turns out our charcoal pit serves a dual purpose. It's trapped a hare. Nice. Whilst harvesting it though, I get a little taste of my own medicine from a creepy crawling drifter. I wish I had some medicine. It looks like the simplest healing item I can make is to mash horsetail into some reeds. Not a horse's tail, but a plant named horsetail. I don't know where any of that is though, so it's not very useful knowledge right now. I just kind of stumble out into the wilderness looking for either copper or horsetails, and perhaps surprisingly I find copper. But not how I need to find it. It's in the walls here, and I have no way of getting it out. Not yet, anyway. We'll get there. This is what I need. A single piece of copper just sitting on the ground. I mean, we need more than a single piece, obviously, but this is a start. And it indicates the presence of a copper deposit below, which we won't be able to mine yet. Basically, we have to run around grabbing nuggets from the floor until we have enough to make a pickaxe and a hammer, and then we're allowed to take copper from the walls. So that's what I'm doing for the immediate future. Running around looking at the ground. Exploring generally seems to be a great idea in this game. You can find all kinds of useful things by just running around. Like this little ruin. It's interesting, but it doesn't seem to have anything for me. Well, aside from a few mushrooms, but I don't think that's anything to do with the ruin. I grabbed some carrot seeds and ran home before dark, where I made a little wicker basket to expand our currently tiny storage capabilities. The next morning, our shiny new watering can is ready to be used. Very good, but that's a pretty labour-intensive way to moisten dirt. Don't worry, I won't do it this way forever. But now I'm going to have to do quite a bit more clay forming, so I'll grab a few more stacks of the stuff, before heading out for some more wood. And I also find this tool plant, which gives thatch when broken. Very nice, something to build a roof with, I guess. You don't get much though, so I decided to dig up its roots and replant them at home. Very proactive, Hazor. Good thinking. Look at him, he's learning. Back at home, whilst I'm expanding the front lawn to fit carrots, I come under attack from some more nasties. I think it's because we've got the cave next door, they just passively spawn where it's dark or something. But it's not all bad, because you can actually harvest them. You don't always get something, but occasionally you'll get either some flax fibre or a gear of some sort. Like this one, shiny and blue. Apparently I can use it to set a returning point. Honestly, I had assumed that just sleeping in a bed sets your respawn, but I was wrong. Alright, enough hanging around. Carrots in the ground. Cooking pot and bowl. Firing. Pickaxe head mould. Also firing. Now I just need more copper. and I could just go back to running around for more copper nuggets, but instead I read about panning in the survival handbook. I made myself a bowl and stood in the nearby pond, trying to figure out exactly how to make this work. Definitely not like that. Alright, I figured it out. This is neat. You get various handy things out of it, like rusty gears, arrowheads, rocks. Most importantly though, you occasionally get chunks of copper. But it's getting dark, so we'll continue this on the morrow. After using that glowy gear to set our spawn point, it's into bed. Now, remember that hide we coated in fat earlier? Well, now it's a pelt and we can turn it into a hunter backpack. Hooray! One more inventory space. That's progress. Whilst out grabbing branches, I find some peat in the ground. Peat the flammable dirt, that is, not Pete the local pig farmer. This is a neat alternative to firewood that can actually fire clay objects more quickly. It's very cool. And as it would happen, Aphid just happens to be buying 12 peat for 2 rusty gears right now as well. Which is nice, I guess. Thanks, Aphid. Back home, I realised that I can stack some things like this peat on the ground in a neat pile, saving on precious storage space and also increasing the coziness levels of our little mud box. You know what else would increase the coziness levels? Cooking some porridge with cranberries in our freshly fired pot. Look at the little lid bobbling around. That's incredible, I love it. It's so cute. But that's enough sitting around enjoying life. It's back to panning. I need copper. And quite a bit of it too. A copper nugget contains 5 units of copper. A tool head mould takes 100 units to fill, and to get copper more effectively I need to make a pick and a hammer. Therefore, I need 40 copper nuggets. I think quite luckily I also got a copper spearhead from panning. Once it's dark and I'm too scared to keep standing in the pond, I'll tie that onto a stick and also make some tongs, which I'll need to handle hot things once the time comes to do some forging. But that time has not come yet. First, it's more panning. So much more panning. About 20 minutes of panning, to be exact. But you can't argue with those results. 40 copper nuggets and some other tat. Not too fussed about all that though, because it's time for copper. I don't really want to start slinging molten metal around in my mud hut, so I'll set up my moulds and a fire pit outside and get into it. I don't have much charcoal, so I'll start off with some peat to get the crucible up to temperature. I don't know if this is a reasonable thing to do, but it felt smart. Anyway, now we're cooking, melting up 240 units of copper to be poured into the moulds. And you'll notice a third mould here. That's for a sword. I don't have enough copper yet, but soon. Now they've got to cool down and harden up. In version 1.20, which we'll switch to later, it'd be a bad idea to leave these out in the open because if it rains, they'd go pop. But that wasn't a thing here, so don't worry about it. Whilst we wait, it seems like a good idea to get wood. Not like that, perv. After getting wood and piling it up in a new, bigger pit back home, we can now make tools. Actual tools made of metal. So now that we can get more copper, we will need more charcoal. So I give up on the 3x3 pit and just set another 2x2 going. It just wasn't going to happen. You need so much wood. For dinner tonight we're having a hearty stew of carrots. Just carrots. Delicious. In the morning though, it's time to get serious. We'll be starting with the node that we spotted in that cave. The game rudely labels it as being of poor quality, which means that each chunk contains 15 units of copper. We got 20, meaning 300 units. Enough to make a few more tools, but not nearly enough. So we continue, digging at one of the nodes we marked earlier. This one's medium quality and totals just over 400 units. Very good. On the hunt for more, I found something even better though. A surface deposit of tin. The metallurgists and survival gamers among you will know that this means we can now make bronze. We don't get all that much, but you also don't actually need very much. We'll make use of that later. The day continues much as it began, which is to say I spent all day digging up copper before returning home for a hearty meal of red meat, chicken and some cranberries. Feels Scandinavian somehow. In total we brought back just over 200 nuggets of copper, enough to make an anvil, which uses 900 units. So I make a mould for a prospecting pick, which is a whole thing, we'll get to that, and also one for an anvil. The next morning, whilst waiting for the moulds to fire and after another session of fending off the clay horrors, I'll cast a Falk's blade to make said fending easier, and then go to hunt down some berries. I realise at this point that I could have been scooping up these berry bushes to plant back at base too, rather than running around gathering them like a savage. And then I died to a fox again. I thought because I had mastery over the elements of the earth that I was better than them, but no, apparently not. Another large but poor quality copper node later, we grab our freshly cast blade and make the falx itself. Insert curved swords meme here. Storage at the base is still a big issue, so I go and gather a load of cattails to make baskets with, which makes the mud hut feel very cluttered all of a sudden, but you know, it had to be done. I have things that need storing. Then after establishing my cranberry plantation, the molds are done firing. Anvil, prospecting pick, and axe. So I set enough units of copper in a crucible to make all three, and then defended my open-air smithy from the nasties of the night with my new copper blade, which does indeed work rather well. It lacks the range of a spear, but the damage more than makes up for it. Smelting larger batches takes far longer, but eventually, after quite a bit of home defense, we're filling the molds and heading to bed. The next morning, voila! Anvil, axe, and prospecting pick. We'll need some other kit to make use of the anvil, but that's fine, I just wanted to get it made. Next on the to-do list is to learn how to prospect. I told you we'd get to it. It's not actually as complicated as it may first seem. You just have to sample 3 stone blocks. They have to be at least 3 blocks apart, but not more than 16, or something like that anyway. And the result spits out like this. Apparently here we have ultra-high cassiterite, which is tin, alongside poor magnetite, which is iron, and also some chromite, which is a crazy late-game thing, don't worry about that. The percentages mean that, for example, within this prospected area, 0.24% of blocks will contain cassiterite, which doesn't seem like a lot for an ultra-high reading, but tin is actually a very rare mineral. Later on you'll see me getting readings upwards of 12% for copper. I'm not certain exactly what the area is, whether it's the blocks between my samples or just a fixed radius, I have no idea. But whatever the case, every prospecting result gets marked on the map. So eventually, if you have a visual mind, you're able to build a sort of mental heat map of various minerals, allowing you to locate the rough peak of a node. This knowledge lets you dig exploratory shafts in areas you know to be rich with a particular mineral, and then use the prospecting pick's other mode, node search, to home in on them. Node search just checks a radius of 6 blocks by default for any ores and tells you what's there. Armed with this knowledge, I feel ready to extract vast quantities of shinies from the earth. But first, I'll extract my first batch of turnips. Stored in the pot in my mud hut, they'll last for 22 days, which is a decently long time, but apparently if I put them in a cellar, they'd last even longer. So that's something to keep in mind for later. In my travels, I've found a couple of seashells, which can be ground down to lime, and then you put the lime in the coconut and no. You mix the lime with water to make, and you'll never believe this, lime water, which can be used to prepare hides for tanning into leather. Collecting enough lime from seashells is realistically never going to work for anything more than 1 or 2 hides though, so eventually we'll have to find some kind of lime-bearing stone. I mention this though because it's led me down the grinding rabbit hole. No, not that one. The one that involves a quern. A basic stone mill used for making lime, flour, and various other powders. To get the stone blocks required to craft one, you can't just mine a stone block, since that just gives you stones. You have to mine out all of the blocks surrounding an intact block, at which point it'll pop off and you can use it for crafting. It's an interesting idea. With my quern, I grind up my starfish and realise that I'm not going to be making any substantial quantity of leather this way, so I head to bed, tummy filled with a hefty stew of turnip, and more turnip. If I wanted to play with leather, I'd need barrels anyway, which need planks, which need a saw, which need ingots, so once I've made and fired some ingot molds, I can make those, followed by a forge, in which we can heat our copper ingots before bashing one into the shape of a saw on the anvil. This is quite an involved process, and it doesn't get any less involved. Smithing tools and weapons like this lends them a real weight from the time you invested to every stage of the process. From prospecting for the ore, gathering firewood for the charcoal pit, all the way up to actually hammering out the ingot. Anyway, with that saw, we've entered the plank age, which I'd say means it's time to stop living in a mud hut. I start clearing some space, but then I get distracted by the idea of irrigation, making a little ring of farmland with a single block of water in the centre. This moistens the land up to 75%, which isn't as good as if you water it, but it's pretty good considering you don't actually have to do anything. I'm interrupted further by the notification that a light temporal storm is approaching. Spooky. In case you were wondering, I've been here for just over a season now. It's the 4th of June. Summer is just beginning. And with the approaching threat, I decide to fashion some armor from wood. It's not super protective and it won't last very long, but it's better than nothing. As I expand my floating farm platform and build its little stone wall, it might seem like I'm wasting time with a temporal storm incoming. But I actually figured that a space like this would be a good spot to fight off the hordes of nasties presumably coming with it. And as the storm begins and the nasties arrive, that seems to be proven correct. I'm standing in my future farm slashing away at new and terrifying variants of drifters, some of which damn near one-shot me like this nightmare drifter. And in the end I did die a good few times, so it's a good thing I used that temporal gear to set my spawn point earlier. It's possible that I could have just sat in my mud hut and waited this out, but I wanted to stand in the open and yell into the face of death at least one time. Partially just to feel alive, but also because it means I was able to harvest some flax fibers from the drifters. 6 in total, which isn't a lot, but pretty handy. The storm wanes and now I can get back to work on flattening a space to build in. This little area here should have enough space for everything I want to do. I'm not expecting to build anything incredibly grand or beautiful. That will probably come in later playthroughs. I just want to experience the game for now. And with the concept of a larger farm looming, I'm out exploring to gather new seeds. And quickly find some flax. Very good. I need a lot of that one if I ever want to make cloth in any substantial quantities. In other, less positive farming news, the next morning I see that my rye has been stunted by the heat. Each crop has a maximum and minimum temperature it can tolerate, and rye is much happier in colder climes. So with summer arriving, it's gotten too hot. It will still grow, it just won't yield as much produce. Out exploring on the other side of the lake, where there's a large forest, I come across absolutely shed loads of that horsetail plant that I need to make healing poultices. Very nice. I also find plenty of rye and spelt seeds, so back at the base we'll get those into the ground in our new farm. And of course the byproduct of harvesting all of those wild grains is, naturally, having a load of grains, which can be ground into flour and made into dough, which, after quickly making an oven out of clay, can be cooked into bread, which rises right in front of you. It's extremely cute. My freshly baked rye bread lasts 11 days in the pot, which is nice, but it doesn't actually provide that much satiation. Dough is more worthwhile to make pies with, as I'll discover later. I was also experimenting with tanning at this point, grabbing some oak logs to make tannins with, but like I said, without a good source of lime I'm not going to be making any real quantities of leather, so I won't bother getting into it just yet. I should be building a new home now, but I keep getting distracted, whether it's by hunting deer or by mining zinc ore for some reason. This game just has so many different things to keep you busy with. Like making a soup with your first carrot harvest, for example. Soup seems like a good way to stretch less ingredients into multiple servings, since water is infinite. After another day of futzing around and not really accomplishing much, I head out exploring again and find a cave with something in the walls. On closer inspection, after fending off the locals, it turns out to be brown coal, which doesn't burn as hot as charcoal, so it can't be used for everything, but it will certainly be nice to have. There's absolutely massive quantities of it in here, and I'm almost dead. Oh, scratch that. I am dead. So I'll grab my things and get out of here. Marking it on my map, of course. I continued exploring and found some more copper right next to another trader. A treasure hunter trader named Roy. This guy will become important later, but for now he's neither buying nor selling anything of interest to me. Then I finally found some more flax to make a simple bow with. I had a little swim around this interesting structure which contained some submerged onion seeds, and I'm realizing now as I write this that I should probably have dug around underneath these ruins, but never mind. Shortly after all this, I get suddenly and violently eaten by a wolf. Ouch. After recovering my things and getting back home for a sleep, I decide that it's time to make some tin bronze. I only found enough tin to make a little bit, so I can't make a tier 2 anvil, but to be honest, that's fine. I don't need one yet. You can smith bronze ingots on a copper anvil anyway. So I'll be using my little bit of tin bronze to make a pickaxe, and turning the rest into an ingot for later use. Now then, I made a bow, so let's use it. I found a piggy out here, a nice big target. Arrows don't drop as much as I expected them to, so it took me a little bit to get my aim dialed in, and the simple bow isn't particularly accurate at the best of times, but eventually the pig died, rewarding us with a nice haul of meat, fat and hides. I also hunted a deer with zero self-preservation instinct, and managed to fend off an angry wolf. I like my bow. On a second playthrough I would probably choose the hunter class. Back home, I made a bit of a mistake. Trying to make a falx blade out of that bronze ingot, my copper hammer broke. I'd need a hammer to make more copper with which to make more hammers. This is a dilemma. It would be wise to keep a spare hammer, it seems. Luckily on this occasion I had enough leftover tin to make some more bronze, and mix it with the leftovers in the other crucible to cast a new hammerhead. Then once it's cooled we can use it to finish our new sword. It does about 1 extra damage compared to the copper version. Nice. Alright, I want to make a house. Therefore I need some cobblestone. A quick trip to the cave later we're flush with andesite rocks to mix with some clay into cobblestone. Shortly after starting to build, I stop, because I realise that I don't know how to make glass. I know that it's made from quartz, but the melting temperature is quite a bit higher than what we're currently working with. So I need to make something called a bloomery, which is essentially just a chimney. Look, if you've ever watched Primitive Technologies, you already know all about this. It lets you burn things at a temperature higher than your fuel can normally manage, through the power of a draft. Later we'll use them for blooming iron, hence the name, but for now it'll make glass. I set a load of bricks firing for one and got back to some more metal casting, just stocking up on bronze tools. I also cast some lamellae, curious how many I would get from a single mould, which turned out to be just the one, and you need a lot to make any armour, so I don't think this is a good use for our metal right now. Back to house building. It's July and I'm just starting to work on a house. Feels like madness. It'll be fairly basic, a box with a cellar and an upper floor, but I don't actually know how much space I need, so I'm just kind of following my gut. It started raining a lot now and it keeps putting out my pit kilns, so I have to build this ugly but functional dirt umbrella over them. I don't like it, but here we are. This rain, by the way, is really quite something. My game sounds like this for quite a while here. In the search for some larger storage items, I made this crate, which it turns out is a very large storage item indeed, but you can only keep a single type of item in a crate, so not quite what I'm looking for. Instead I have to make some nails and strips, which then allow me to make big chests. Ah, sweet storage. After another lumberjacking trip across the lake, we now have a second floor. And I also used some of this wood, along with some pelts and resin that I've been gathering so far, to make wooden lamellar armour. It's not great, but it's better than nothing. Maybe it's a waste of pelts, but I'm not sure yet. Now in the still extremely loud rain, time to run a bloomery for some glass. I added 4 quartz and 1 charcoal and set it running. This will make 2 glass blocks, which isn't a lot. It turns out you can run quite a bit more than 4 quartz at a time, but I didn't know that yet, so here we are. Whilst waiting, I want to finish the cellar so we can move into our new home. So I line the walls with stone and lay a nice floor. Lovely. Very cozy. But I don't really like this staircase. And I also don't know whether it will actually work as a cellar whilst being open to the main floor like this, so instead we'll use a trapdoor and a ladder. That passed enough time for the bloomery to finish, which you have to break into for your reward. It usually gives you most of the bricks you need to rebuild it though, so it's not too painful. What is painful is how little glass it made. There are ways to stretch this glass. I could saw it into slabs to effectively double the window coverage, but I didn't do that, so whatever. Look, it's a start. Now for a roof, which I thought would be thatch, but that's going to take ages to gather enough of, so instead, meat sod, which is like turf for your roof. There you go. A house. It still needs windows, but it's undeniably a house. Not the most beautiful, but functional. Next, my mind wanders to animal husbandry. I'd like some chickens, but, I can't find any. I swear, in spring I couldn't move a meter without hearing them clucking away. Maybe they saw my house going up and know what comes next. Anyway, I decided to climb a mountain for almost no reason, but the view from up here is nice. Back down in the woods I was grabbing some mushrooms when this angry wolf just came for me out of nowhere. And whilst running away from it, a bear also joins in on the bullying. Okay, the message I'm getting here is that I went out looking to capture animals, and the animal kingdom wasn't happy about that. Message received, I'm going back home. Where there's a temporal storm incoming. Oh dear. Best set our spawn point in the new home. And then I'll stand in my designated farm/temporal storm arena to see how many Rustworld horrors I can kill. I don't really know if it's worth fighting monsters in these storms, but standing out here in my farm trying to kill things over my fence kind of gives me Terraria vibes in a way that I can't quite explain, but that I do like. And I did even get some rare loot. I don't know what a Jonas subassembly is, but it's used in some things that look decidedly late game. After the battering I took in the storm, I decided to make a bronze shield, which gives a 15% passive block chance but can also be held up by crouching for a 90% chance. I also decided to make some bee skeps, but they don't come with bees, so I have to find some wild bees to populate them with. Zooming out the map, we can see that I haven't actually explored much past the initial area generated, so I guess out we go. I'm sure I'll find many lovely things out here, like cabbage seeds, multiple varieties of mushroom, some high fertility soil, and a clothing trader. But as usual, we're forced to come home for dark, and after cresting the hill to my lovely home, I realized that I can actually cook more than 4 quarts at a time in the bloomery, so not 2 glass at a time. Oops. I probably didn't need to make 4 of them in that case, but oh well, they're firing now. I thought maybe it's time now to make some more bread, but no, that's not correct. It's time for pie. This is when I managed to make my first bit of leather as well, by the way. Just 3 pieces, and yeah, you need 14 to make the leather armor that serves as the base for chainmail, and 8 for a leather backpack, so that's not gonna do it. I said this earlier, but quite a bit later on we'll start properly producing leather. Not yet. Not even accounting for the lack of lime, to get more leather I'll want more arrows, which means I need feathers, which means I need chickens, and they've gone extinct, so tough luck. Right, anyway, pies. The oven is hot, so in they go. Once cooked, you can slice them up into 4 pieces, and each slice will last 8 days in my bag or 15 days in the pot. Very good. While we were doing that, the bloomeries were cooking glass. The house is now only missing 4 windows. At this point, 18 hours or so into the recording, I just left a note saying, "This game is very good." I am thoroughly enjoying myself, so let's keep going. I think it's time to strike the earth. Cue Dwarf Fortress soundtrack. Pretty much directly below our home, as we already know, we've got ultra-high tin and decent iron. That's very good, but I would like to find a good copper reading too. And also it just kind of feels like a good idea to map out the area's mineral density. So after about 40 minutes of prospecting, I got my first hit of copper. It's a minuscule reading though, which probably means I'm on the edge of a node. So the next day, after a rest and some more pie cooking, I head out to get more coal from that cave, and prospect it along the way. I got a very poor copper reading of 2.2% and start to try and home in on its high point. A wolf tried to kill me again, so this time I killed it. I'm your dad now, wolf. I've gotten wooden armor. Jumping forward a few days, and don't worry, you haven't missed anything important, I'm just prospecting and cooking pies, I decide to jump into a cave and find some rich bismuth. Oh, very nice. This can make a different variety of tin if you add some zinc to the mix. I decided that while I'm down here to try some exploratory vertical shafts, and after passing by more bismuth, my pick gave me a reading for large amounts of copper. I mined a full stack and a half of chunks before my pickaxe gave up, meaning it's time to head back home. On the way there, a moose tried to kill me, which was extremely rude, but its large hides made me realize I really need a good source of lime. Various stones contain lime, the issue is finding them. I'll get around to that, but first, it's time for a load of bronze. I honestly don't know when I got it, but I have quite a bit of zinc, so I can make over 2,000 units of bismuth bronze. With that, I'll make an anvil, because we'll need a bronze anvil to work iron, the next tier of metal. I'm going to use it to make our first serious bit of armor, because you don't need any leather for a chainmail helmet. Each chain segment uses 2 ingots and is a very involved smithing experience. But here we are, after a whole day of working the forge, I have a metal hat. Neat. For the last 2 weeks or so, while we've been out doing various things, a load of rye and spelt has been growing in the farm. So I'll quickly throw together a new pot to store it all in before we head back to the mines. I think we'll try and go straight into the Iron Age after our short stay in the Bronze Age. If we have access to iron ore, then why hang around? From all my prospecting, the best reading I got for magnetite is 2.5%, right in the middle of our lake, conveniently close to home. So down we go, digging under the lake bed and starting a vertical shaft, prospecting in node search mode every few blocks down. Quickly we find some more tin, which is nice but not what I'm after, so we'll go deeper. And perhaps surprisingly, before too long I get a hit for small amounts of magnetite. With that, I'll dig a small tunnel and start prospecting in various directions, essentially playing a game of hotter or colder with the stone. If I get a medium reading, but then continue further in that same direction and get a small reading, it means I've moved past the node and need to go in a different direction. You get the idea, you just chase good readings, and oh boy, is this a good reading. Huge amounts of magnetite. Finally, I find the stuff and it's of rich quality. Lovely. But if you're paying attention, you'll see that my temporal stability, this cyan gear down at the bottom of my screen here, is dropping. Being underground for too long is bad for you, and eventually you'll end up in the rust world, taking constant damage and spawning in a load of nasties. I'm not actually given the chance to drain my stability any further though, because after a good bit of mining, a temporal storm is approaching. Well, up we go then. I got 2.5 stacks of magnetite chunks, and the prospecting pick was still registering large amounts of the stuff down there, so I expect we're set for quite a long time. Before that temporal storm gets here, we have our first flax harvest, which gave us about 40 flax fibers. We'll use that in a bit, but first let's make some iron bloom. I put 80 magnetite nuggets into a bloomery and set it going. But quite some time before that finishes, the temporal storm is upon us, and I repeatedly die to the strongest of the drifters. My bronze hat can't save me from them. I did get another Jonas thingy though, an eccentric gearbox. I still don't really know what to do with that, so I'll put it in a box and move on for now. Alright, remember all that flax? One thing I can use it for is to make better bags. And that is definitely what I'll do, because inventory space is just so precious. I just dumped the old bags in the lake. It's fine, they're biodegradable. And now our first bit of iron bloom is finished. 4 bits, actually. Next you have to heat them up in the forge and work them on the anvil to make an ingot. Look upon that which I hath wrought. Literally, wrought. It's wrought iron. I've got plenty more magnetite blooming away, and after a quick pie making break, I'll get back to the anvil to make more ingots. Now just to make some tools with it. A pickaxe and a shovel for now, but actually, perhaps strangely, now that I'm sitting on some iron, I think we need to shift our focus a little. It's almost September, and winter is coming. I don't really know if I'm prepared. I also don't really know what prepared looks like, but it's definitely not a set of worn-out commoner clothes, so here's the recipes for a set of fur clothing. Just pelts and a knife. It's pretty simple stuff. I look like a damn yeti in it, but there's no need to wear it yet. So I'll build a trunk in the bedroom to store all of my gear. I did also make an armor stand, but it turns out you can't put regular clothing on it, so it's just our bedside friend for now. The next morning I headed to Roy the treasure hunter trader, and I found some chickens on the way. Wonderful. Let's try and lead one of them back to base. Never mind. Back to Roy. This nice blue squire shirt only costs 3 gears, and will help a little bit with the incoming cold. And then he also gives me a quest, which was unexpected, but okay. He'll give me a tip to a valuable location if I bring him a tin bronze pick. Okay, I'll try to keep that in mind, but now I'm back to exploring, mainly hoping to find some animals that I can successfully lead back home. I spotted a cockerel in a lake. Alright guys, let's go get some cock. Don't take that out of... whatever. It swims directly towards a black bear, and you know what? I'm willing to fight a bear for this chicken. Thanks to my shield, this isn't actually a huge challenge. The hardest part is seeing what you're doing when half of your screen is covered by a shield and the other half is mashed into an angry black bear. It gives us 2 huge pelts, which I'm sure will be very handy. Now, back to chicken running. It's getting a little dark, so this is hard to see, but we're nearly there. Come on, little friend. You're gonna love it here. Maybe next time. At least I've confirmed that chickens exist again. It really felt like they vanished for a good while there. I'm sure we'll convince some to live with us eventually, but now I've decided that it's lime time. With access to massive bear hides, I've simply got to start tanning properly. So I'll make some food for the road, along with an iron falx and a fresh pickaxe. Since I'll potentially be venturing very far from home and I don't want to take my main set of tools and lose them if I die. My inventory for the journey looks like this. And I suppose I best take some packed dirt for shelter building too. The only thing left is to pick a direction and go. North looks good to me. Obviously I'll also be prospecting as I go. Day 1 of the voyage comes to an end with no lime and a cozy little natural cave for a bedroom. Early in the morning of the next day I spot a trader. They're much easier to see at night owing to their lanterns. He's a commodities trader, meaning he sells all manner of random materials, none of which are currently of interest to me, but it's good to know he's here anyway. Later on that day, whilst bouncing around on some gravelly hills, I spot this white stone in a pillar, and it turns out to be chalk, which, it turns out, grinds into lime. Hooray! Good stuff! I'll grab a load of it and take a quick look around, and yeah, there's absolutely shed loads of it in these pillars, so we're good. Instead of heading directly home with the chalk though, I'll instead do a loop south and cover more ground, taking the scenic route home, sleeping in a dirt box on top of a hill before getting back to it in the morning. Prospecting, raiding some ruins and stocking up on feathers, since now we can prepare hides in large numbers, we'll probably want to be able to hunt. I stumbled across a sow whilst getting back towards home, so okay, it's not a chicken, but it's something. And after a lot of smacking it about in the lake, I was able to successfully trap it. I'm not sure what I'll do with a lone female pig, but, you know, it's company, if nothing else. By the way, I needed to make a knife real quick, so I started to make one with flint, and this is when I learned that you can hold Alt to craft with the cursor instead of the crosshair. Would have been handy to know that for a while now. And alright, this point is when I updated to version 1.20, which, among other things, means the game got more saturated and colourful, like a YouTube thumbnail. Don't get used to it though, winter is coming after all. One of the major features of this patch is the rideable elk, and in the patch notes they say that the treasure hunter trader will sell it to you after you give him the tin bronze pick. So I quickly bashed one together and ran it out to him. He thanked me and gave me a map to the Resonance Archives, whatever they are, but doesn't seem to have an elk for sale. Maybe they just mean he has a chance to stock one now, so I'll try and keep an eye on his restocks, I guess. The location he gave me is about 6,000 blocks to the east, and is probably infested with nasties, so we'll keep it in mind for a fun post-winter adventure, I think. Now it's time for hunting. I ground up some chalk and made a few more barrels to get my existing hides soaking, before settling in for some fletching. Right after killing this guy. He's a bowtorn, one of the new enemies in this patch. It's not just mudmen hiding in the dark anymore. Smithing arrowheads from ingots is quite involved again, like chainmail, but at least 9 heads only takes 1 ingot. I'm also sure you get pretty quick at doing this stuff if you're doing it often. I made enough to make 33 copper arrows, which only have a 15% chance to break on hit, so should last a decently long time. Early the next morning I head across the lake in search of prey. And hey, do you hear that? That's bees. I'll swim back across the lake and eat some food, because I forgot to do that this morning, and then pick up one of those skeps I made earlier. I'll place it next to a straw dummy underneath that wild hive, and leave them to it. When the hive's population grows enough, they'll swarm and populate the skep. When I pick up the populated skep, there's a chance that they'll get angry, which is what the straw dummy is for. Right afterwards, I killed a hare, and whilst harvesting it, everything goes ominously dark. The gods are displeased. It's either that or the moon just passed in front of the sun, who can say? Also, whilst out hunting, I've noticed that animals are behaving differently in this patch. They'll no longer swim all the way out into deep water. Instead, they'll get a little ways out and then head for the nearest dry land. This is a behaviour that I'm pretty sure I can use to my advantage. When the next day I found a group of chickens to our west along the lakeshore, I made use of that new water behaviour. I'm able to quite easily lead a hen all the way back to my pen. It's not quick, but it's reliable. And they're much less likely to fall into a cave and die this way too. 1 hen successfully contained. Now for her mate. After almost a full day of chicken chasing, cock secured. Please don't demonetize me for that one, YouTube. Now I can set the hides we gathered to soak and head up to bed. In the morning I decided to do some panning. At the various ruins I've been digging up this bony soil, and I learned that it can be panned like gravel. You mostly get bones from it, unsurprisingly, but all kinds of random things fall out, like this rough peridot gem. Cool. I also got a different kind of gem, the kind that comes out of a chicken's arse. Sitting on the floor is an egg. It turns out if I want them to hatch into chicks, I need to place a hen box, which I guess makes sense. Up in my lake sifting my bones, I get a lore book. It seems to be detailing how the creations of these people turned against them. Something called an Eidolon murdered some folk. Not particularly pleasant reading, but okay, cool, I'm gonna get back to panning now. One of the items you get fairly commonly from bony soil is flax fibres, which is really handy because I only needed 1 more to make a proper bed with. Better beds let you sleep for longer in Vintage Story. which is really handy because when you can only sleep for 7 hours, you're always going to wake up well before it's light, which gives the nasties a chance to spawn all over the place. Now we can sleep for a full 8.5 hours. Good stuff. Winter really do be closing in though. The days are getting shorter and the temperature is dropping. I briefly contemplated building a greenhouse to grow crops a little deeper into the cold season, but I decided that's probably not necessary. I've got what seems like it will probably be enough food stockpiled now. You get plenty of grain from crops, so it's not like we're going to run out of pie dough, and there's plenty of veggies to fill said dough with if we run out of meat. With pies in mind, I kiss my mannequin wife goodbye and head out to gather firewood. And after a day of deforestation, I stack it all up in the basement. Plenty of pie fuel for winter. Let's make some while we're down here. Since we've been hunting, there's a good stock of red meat that won't last very long if left raw. 3 meat pies, each providing an absolutely massive amount of satiation and lasting 24 days in the chest here. They'd last even longer in a pot, of course, but I expect to have eaten them long before they'd go bad. This pretty much confirms to me that I'm good for winter. At least on the food front anyway. I've got plenty of turnips, carrots, onions and even some cabbages to make pies and other meals with, so I'm filled with a warming sense of food security for the coming cold. And to add to that, we've also got our first fertile egg laid in the hen box. How lovely. Chicks are on the way. So what's next? Well, the way I see it, once winter comes, I'll find myself with very little to do aside from baking pies and processing all of my iron into various useful things. Therefore, I probably want a windmill. Because with mechanical power I can be free of manually working the quern for flour, and also with the use of a helve hammer, not have to manually work iron blooms into ingots. So, windmills are more effective the taller they are. So I'll start building a tower on top of the mud box, which should probably be replaced with a nice stone base actually. So say goodbye to the cob cuboid, everyone. It served us well, but its time has passed. Now it's the base of our future windmill. The harder part of this process though is making the moving parts. There are various of them, axles and gears mainly, both of which require fat to make. Gears also use resin, but that's easy enough to get in large quantities because it quite literally grows on trees. Fat is a little harder to come by, so I'm going to do quite a bit of hunting again. Out with my bow, having a fantastic time. It is generally easier though to just run animals to water, as their new deep water avoidant behaviour has made them much easier to run down and kill in melee. So I'm hunting more like a shark than an Iron Age man now, but if deer behaved like this in real life, then this is probably how they'd have done it too. I finally learned around this point of the tool rack, a revolutionary bit of tech that lets me store tools on the wall. The reason I learned about it is because they're apparently a good way to dry a bow stave, and I found some bamboo in some ruins, which you can use to make a recurve bow with. But you have to dry the bow stave first. Same thing goes for longbows. I made a longbow stave ages ago and it's been sat in my inventory drying for days. I can't actually make the recurve bow, by the way. You need the bowyer trait of the hunter class for that, but I didn't know that. Anyway, in other news, I've got axles running all the way down the windmill from the rotor now. But something's missing. Something important. Sails. Yeah, we're gonna need a lot of flax for that. Nothing we can do but wait. And while we wait, let's make a load of roof tiles. We can fire them 48 at a time, so 2 pits should do the trick. With all of our lime now preparing hides, we actually have a tannin shortage, so it's off across the lake to fell a few ancient and mighty oak trees. I always hear a wolf here, but I've never seen it, so I assume it's an angry woodland spirit, mourning the forest's losses to the industrious nature of man. And speaking of industrious, that skep we put down near the hive a while ago is now filled with industrious little bees. It turns out a populated skep requires an empty backpack slot to pick up though, so I'll come back for it in a moment. Payload secured. Backpack full of bees headed home. I decided to walk them back around the lake in case being submerged was a problem for them. I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised with this game. Alright, the shingles are cooked, and after putting down this asshole hanging out by my chickens, I noticed that it's snowing. With that reminder of winter's creeping advance, I bust out the chisel for some important corner stair carving. This will contribute meaningfully to our survival, I assure you. As will the windmill's black-tiled roof. It's an odd-looking windmill, rather short. It will probably look better with sails, I hope. And that roof is almost certainly going to end up getting quite a bit higher. It's a bit of a chode right now. But for now, I'm just chilling in the cellar, cooking a load of food. The sound of the pot lid clattering away is just peak cozy for me right now. Remember, as I'm playing this, it's early January. It's freezing cold outside. But in my pie cellar, it's nice and warm. But I have to leave the warm cellar because I want to get a charcoal pit going to fuel my winter smithing efforts. Speaking of efforts, our leatherworking efforts are starting to bear fruit. I decide that the first thing I ought to make is a jerkin, the leather body armor that serves as the base for the various tiers of metal armor. I realized one morning that it would also be a good idea to go and collect a load of that brown coal we found in a cave earlier. Along the way I took out a deer with an absolute corker of a shot, followed by another bear. Lovely huge hides, good stuff. In the coal caves I occasionally have to fend off some drifters, but before too long I've cleared out the cave of everything it's got. This combined with the charcoal from the pit will hopefully see us through to spring. Back home I'm fiddling around deciding how to store my coal when I notice that it's 0 degrees out on November the 1st. It's getting cold now. It's time now I think to make a helve hammer, which is the tool you need for automated ironworking. And it turns out it's quite large. Look at that thing. Absolute weapon. It'll take me some figuring out. You place the hammer in a base and then you need something called a toggle in front of it. That's the mechanical part that you connect to an axle to make the hammer go thunk thunk thunk. But that's for later, we don't technically even have a windmill yet. I have a building that vaguely resembles one, but that's about to change. I have just enough flax now to make a set of sails. They do need a block of clearance from the roof though, so like I thought earlier, I will have to lift it up at some point. Also, it does look a little silly with those tiny sails. That ain't gonna do it, Chief. But now that the snow is settling, I'm pretty much screwed on flax. I think I'll get one more harvest before the winter fully closes in, but that's gonna be it. More important than how it looks though, is how it functions. Which is currently not at all. This chode of a windmill isn't strong enough for the helve. I did at least get enough wind to spin the quern and grind some more lime though. A temporal storm kind of caught me off guard here, so I went out and killed a horrific spider-like creature, and then instead wondered if maybe this time, what if I just hide? Chill inside for a while and let it pass. So I did. Ignore the melting walls, bake pie. Just focus on the pie, don't listen to the voices. They can't hurt you if you're a pie. I did actually go out and hit some things right towards the end. It's only a light storm anyway, so it probably wasn't all that bad. I just got scared of the horrific new monsters. They're a lot nastier than the dopey drifters I've been dealing with until now. The snow is getting pretty serious now, which on the one hand makes spotting wild animals easier, but on the other, you move slower in the piled up snow, and also it's cold. My dude's in Struggletown, look at him shivering. Time for the winter gear, I guess. But hey, look at this. We've got our first little chickie. The flock must grow. In a few generations, apparently they'll stop being terrified of me, but I don't know exactly how many. Whilst out and about yesterday, I got a good chunk of fat, so we can make a few more axles for the windmill and build it up a little higher. It still looks kind of off, but I'm sure that bigger sails are the solution to this problem. I'm sure of it. Now that my first skep has populated my second, I can harvest it. But first, a straw dummy. Because of this. A little swarm of angry yellow voxels. Listen to them gang him. Poor guy. But I got my honeycomb, that's the important part. It's important because wax makes candles. After squeezing out the honey, the combs can then be cooked in a pot with some flax to make one. And that candle can go into a lantern, which will provide me with an eternal waterproof light source. Good stuff. Look at my little lantern. I'm out here because I had to go and get quartz for it. Alright, we've got a good bit of leather now, so I'll make the leg armor as well. And now that we've also got enough cloth for more sails, this will make the windmill look fantastic, I'm sure. Yeah, maybe not, but it does make it work a whole lot better. It's strong enough to run the helve hammer now. So I popped a forge in the windmill and heated up some bloom, and yep, there it goes. It's not very quick, but there it goes, turning it into an ingot. I'm picturing a few years into a vintage story game, multiple windmills powering a bank of helve hammers, working away like crazy. That's not what we have, but I'm picturing it. Anyway, it turns out that if you set a load of barrels to work, you'll very quickly have a whole lot of leather. Funny how that works. So I'll make some leather backpacks to continue my campaign on inventory space. Very nice. But now it's really fully winter. It's snowy as hell. And I don't want to go anywhere as a result. I just want to chill in my cozy base. And with that in mind, I'm thinking about building an extension to said base. A little greenhouse or something. Why not? Don't have much else to do. So Bloomery is making a load of glass, the Helve is bashing out iron. Or, wait, is it? Yeah, that's the problem with windmills. They do have a tendency to suddenly not mill anymore. Our flax is also going to stop flaxing, because it's -5 out. Good night, my sweet flax children. On the other hand, here's a greenhouse update. I made it. Cool. Very nice. It apparently gives a +5 degree temperature bonus for crops, but it's going to get well below -10, so I still won't be able to grow anything. Winter in Vintage Story, or at least my first winter here, is a pretty samey experience. It's super cozy, but undeniably repetitive. I mostly just watch the Helve making iron ingots and eat pies. But I decided I should start making iron chainmail, since I'm stacking up so many ingots. Now, we already saw how involved chainsmithing is earlier, and to make a full set of chain armor you'd need 20 of them. You'd best get to work then. The experienced smiths among you will probably be cringing here, because you know that I can use the Helve hammer to turn ingots into plates, which are a much better starting point for smithing chains. But to be fair, I've got nothing but time here, so it's hardly the end of the world. I've made 9 chains for now, enough to make iron chainmail legs and a helmet. At this point I'm out of iron though, so we're going back underground. There is so much iron under here. I could stay down here for days, but I probably won't because I mined into this cave and this horrific noise started playing. It literally made me tab out and check whether something was going wild on my other screen. But no, it's something in that cave, so I think I'm going to get out of there. Clanging bells and klaxons are my cue to get back above ground. It's fine anyway, I was down there long enough to get 1.4 thousand magnetite. More than enough. I finally realised that I can't make a recurve bow, by the way, so I settled for a longbow instead. Probably won't be using it for a while anyway, but I've made it. And then it's back to the Helve with our new supply of iron. Another fun winter activity is deciding to change up the whole roof of my house. What better time for roofing than when you can't even see the roof under all the snow? Well, it looks better anyway. It's a bit more three-dimensional than before, and the colour will look nice once the snow melts. Now, back to the Helve again. In case you're curious, I'm using all of this Helve staring time to get back into playing guitar. I'm still terrible at it, but it's nice to try. Until the wind slows anyway. Spin faster, damn it! No, hey, stop that, I said faster! Much better. Thank you. I've got enough iron ingots to make my chain body armor at this point, but I want to let the Helve work whilst it's windy to build up a good stockpile of iron. Even a temporal storm isn't going to stop me watching the Helve. It's okay, Hazel. Just focus on the iron bloom. The storm can't hurt you if you're an ingot. I feel like I kind of already said it, but all I can really say for winter is that it's chill. Haha, very funny. But if you're a really impatient gamer and don't have loads of spare time, you'll probably hate playing this like I am now. But I'm just chilling, looking at all the nice things I've made in the beautiful winter scenery. Don't focus too much on the windmill, it's pretty ugly, but it works, that's the important part. Right, back to work in the chainsmithing prison now anyway. After about half an hour of banging ingots into chains, I've done it. Full iron chain armor. Very good. But I can do better. You see, like leather armor serves as the base for chainmail, chainmail serves as the base for either scale or plate armor. Plate seems like a bit much, making you a very slow and very hungry combatant, so you won't die from direct damage, but starvation instead. So I decide to make some scales, and find that the smithing process for scales is actually even worse than chains. It's at this point that I finally realise there simply must be a better way. And I set the Helve hammer to bash out a plate whilst I go and put the scales I made on my hat. It looks really cool. It's got little eye holes and everything. Nice. While I did that, the Helve got most of the way there on a plate, so I help it across the finish line and discover that yes, I can indeed use a plate as a starting point for smithing. Ooh, well, just try not to think about all of the chains I smithed. It's still not exactly super quick to make scales. You still have to move some metal around, but it's way faster than using ingots. So I've made scale legs and a helmet, but the body can wait. I'll go mad if I do any more smithing today. I think I must be suffering from some cabin fever, because I discovered that my straw wife can take a weapon and had a little duel with her. On guard! Yeah, definitely losing it a bit. Something I really love is the different noises that armors make when you move. The sound of my chainmail as I walk reminds me that I'm wearing something I put a lot of effort into making. I really appreciate that little detail. It also reminds you that your hunger will be draining much faster, because armor is heavy. So let's make more pies. I sit in my palace of pies. Literally sitting on one of them. Don't eat that one, it's tainted. Cooking them up one by one in the oven. Yeah, I could have made more ovens to cook them faster, but like I keep saying, I've got nothing but time here, what's the rush? I should, however, have made all the pies identical. By making them all with slightly different contents and patterns on top, they can't stack in containers. So that was a bit of a whiff, but at least it makes my food chest look more full. I'm going to make some more copper arrows now, preparing for a little winter excursion because sitting around waiting for the sun to come back is getting old. Let's see what the winter wonderland is like, and pay Roy a visit. He's selling a treasure map. Alright, I'm in. I love a treasure hunt. It's pretty nearby. In fact, it's so close that I wonder why Roy didn't go and get it himself. Anyway, here we are, time to dig into the cold frozen earth with our bare hands. What wonders will we find? Bricks. We got bricks. I paid 15 gears for that map, and I got bricks. Well, gambling is bad, kids. The house always wins. Fucking Roy. Alright, back home. I want to head a bit deeper underground. Not for more iron this time, but to explore that cave system we mined into earlier. Immediately, I'm met with whatever the hell this awful thing is. A saw blade locust. There's another one a little bit deeper underground, and now I've already got to go back upstairs to grab some more healing items. They seem to consistently drop Jonas parts, which may or may not be useful to me. I guess I would like to make a night vision mask, but that feels pretty unobtainable for now. And I was going to head back underground, but I got distracted making a fruit press and juicing some cranberries, which I left in a barrel next to my bed to ferment into wine. Because why not, I guess? Alright, now I'm going back underground, where after a couple of nasties I find a small ruin, just full of junk seemingly. There's some gears down this little hole in the middle of the room, but that's all. So moving on a little bit deeper, this is something I was actually really hoping to find. The walls here are salty. This stuff is saltpeter, and is a very nice fertilizer for crops like flax. And you can also make explosives out of it, but don't worry about that. The next find is some chromium, which is real late game stuff requiring a steel pick to even mine. So now back up on the surface I'll pop some of that salt in my greenhouse soil, and it turns out it's a slow release fertilizer. And let me tell you, it's very slow, but nonetheless nice to have. The next morning I woke up to find tragedy. My OG rooster is dead. One of the chicks has grown up to replace it, so maybe they kill each other. I don't know, it's either that or it just got old. Maybe we'll never know. After spending a good chunk of January just sitting around waiting for the sun, just like in real life, as February arrives, I'm off back down the hole, digging a more direct path to the caves and marking various ores down there, as well as having an archery duel with a few bowthorns. Shouldn't have come down here for the loot. There's a lot of them. And I'm dead. But hey, it turns out you keep your armor in death. That's handy. I went back and got my stuff, and then after another temporal storm, which I thought I might fight but then got scared and hid instead, it's back to the forge. I want to repair up my armor and then get scale body armor done. A few days later, job done. Full iron scale armor. Good stuff. There's only a few days of winter left now. I'm really longing for spring with the start of March, but you know what? I'm in for disappointment on that front. Anyway, I spend the last few days of February pottering around, feeding the chickens, playing with making fancy soil, and accidentally drinking 9 litres of cranberry wine in the space of 10 minutes, which got us very drunk, but frankly not as drunk as I would expect from 9 litres of bedroom hooch. I also do a whole lot of smithing, preparing a loadout to visit the Resonance Archives. So, here's March, which heralds the arrival of spring, and it's still -7 and snowing. I'm not really sure why I expected a complete hard stop to winter, as though on March the 1st I'd be running through a flowering meadow singing with the birds or something. But whatever. My inventory is chock full, a load of spears, healing items, armor, enough building materials for a hut and a gear to set my spawn in there, and of course, pies. So let's go on a journey to the archives. I don't really know what's in there, but I'm assuming it's going to try and kill me. The journey is long, 6,000 blocks, through a variety of terrains, which would probably look a little more varied if they weren't all covered in snow. I met a trader along the way and cuddled up in his bed for the night before finishing off the journey in the morning. I think the entrance is supposed to be a bit more of a thing, but it's spawned in this very mountainous biome, so it's just a few bricks in a wall. Anyway, I build a little respawn hut and store some things in there before heading underground. It's kind of creepy in here. And I won't spoil every detail of this place, by the way. Partially for the sake of brevity, because this video is getting very long, but also in case you want to try and figure it out yourself, since there's some light puzzle elements to it. I will, however, be showing the fight at the end, because yes, there is indeed something of a boss down here. You descend down the world's longest ladder into a pitch-dark shaft surrounded by a wooden walkway with various different rooms along it, most of which are currently closed. In the engineering room, I pop some coal in the boiler and get things moving. This lights up the place and opens some doors. I'll just say that this machinery in here is missing some pieces, and that there are a couple of scrolls with rough information on where to find said pieces. Whilst moving about the place, occasionally having to deal with the current occupants, I'm finding all kinds of loot, mostly random items of clothing like this lovely shiny amulet. Very nice. It doesn't do anything, but it's shiny. On my second visit to the engineering room, I realised that there are some large wooden doors in the back here, with something ominous behind them. After replacing the first missing piece of machinery, more rooms open up to us, and eventually you end up here in this translocator room, being teleported down to the mines, where a lot of nasties live, I suppose predictably, but also the bit of equipment that we're looking for. Very good. Back to engineering. With everything powered up and running properly, the door to the library opens. However, as one of the scrolls had detailed, the way is blocked, so we have to head down here, to where that thing is. That thing is a boss fight, who I initially get to work on with my falx, which is going okay. I don't take very much damage thanks to my armor and shield, and I'm putting out some decent numbers myself. But this guy, who is an immobilized eidolon, likes to throw you about a bit. So instead I'll start playing around these pillars with my spears and bow. I never mentioned it by the way, but you can't build or break anything in this whole place, so I can't just box it in or something like that. Anyway, the fight is going well, but I'll say it's a little hard to take seriously when my character's pain sound is a French horn. But whatever, I've got plenty of healing left and just have to occasionally run in and grab my spears or arrows to keep putting out damage. It does get a little bit tougher when around 20% health it starts spawning little locusts. They don't do a lot of damage either, but they do make it harder to just hide and heal up. So I get back into melee range to finish the job, and finish the job I do. First try. And I usually say first try as a joke, but it really was first try this time. Very good. The reward for this is access to the library, which looks really awesome, and contains vast quantities of lore. However, I'm literally starving to death, so I strip off my armor, grab these glider schematics, nab some shinies from the display cases, and get the hell out of there. Not that I have any food up here either, but hey, at least I'm starving in style. Dripped up to the gills, iced out of my gourd. Starving to death. So there we go. I built a lovely home, survived winter in it, and then put an ancient mechanical being out of its misery. At least I assume it was miserable. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. It was a hell of a project. And I look forward to playing more Vintage Story sometime. I would love to get really late game with it. Anyway, whatever you do, please remain indoors. Little Blue Hazor is still out there, and he's been hitting the cranberry wine again. There's no telling what he'll do. Until next time, goodbye.